Well, now then, in your 90s, still working, showered with honors. Regrets. Regrets.
Regrets that I wasn't nicer to my mother when I was young. I appreciate my mother so much retrospectively, and this is probably why I mention her a lot when I'm talking or anything. It was difficult. I'm sure it was difficult for both of us, you know, after my father died and no money and everything. There was, but it wasn't the money. It wasn't the money. The money was a bit irrelevant there. It was. We both got rather strong personalities and strong emotions and strong, you know, I'm not that different from her. And so, you know, we were on collision course quite a lot. Not over the major things. That's why I wanted to emphasize that she supported me in these decisions of going into science and all those things, in spite of the fact that it was against her own best interests. So it was more and also, you know, I think that this is an interesting thing, I think that in Victorian times, if you read novels, of that period, very rich in novels, the women were always crying a little, right? There were tears. And I'm not a crier except when it's windy or I laugh or too much. I have a very negative reaction to tears. And I think it was because it was my mother's. I always regarded it as her secret weapon. I mean, she wouldn't look at it that way. She just finds her eyes brimming with tears. But I can't stand this. It brought all the worst feelings out in me. And my students know this. The students, they tell each other this. I remember that one of my students, a very, very good student who went on to be a McGill professor and everything. But if I was sort of criticizing, and I wasn't doing it nastily, I was no different from Heb criticizing us, you know, something about her English, she would say, "Excuse me a minute, Dr. Milner," and she'd go out. And this is what they do. They know that they shouldn't cry in front of me because it brings the worst out in me. You know, it's a bad tactic to cry in front of Dr. Milner. You know, they all pass that word on. For God's sake, don't cry in front of her, you know. And so, I think it all goes back to the fact that my mother's eyes would fill with tears, and I would feel so, you know, frustrated, because what can you do? You know, what can you do? And so I think that I wish I'd been able, I guess I'm saying I wish I had been more mature at 16 than I was, but that's not a fair thing to say about myself, is it? I just think that I wish that I wish that my mother had known that I cared about her, you know. But it's very funny. It was automatic, because every time I went back to England or to Manchester or anywhere, you know, or if I was I would, you know, I don't say prayers, I don't say real prayers, but if I had been a praying person, please don't let my mother be emotional, don't let her, you know, you don't just, please, you know. And I would have also, when I was in Montreal, I would have this fantasy that I was going to get along so well with my mother and everything was fine. And then within 5 minutes of being in the house, that we were quarreling or something. And there was never any problem with Peter, you see. Peter could just sit quietly in a chair and read a book. She never, you know, I seem to get it all. And I wish now that I had been perhaps less like her, or not really, more able to handle this with a calm and reasonable manner like a grown-up, you know.
I suppose there are not many people who don't have regrets about getting on the way they got on with their mothers, I think.
Yes, well, you hear a lot of people. I listen to Eleanor Wachtel in these interviews with writers, and they're often regretting, you know, their bad relations with their fathers. I didn't have that, you know. Yes. I had a wonderful one, and then he died, you know. Yes. I think one of the problems is that you have, certainly in the case of my mother and I, you have sort of personality traits in common, and that this, you know,
yes,
can lead to trouble, whereas if you're a bit complimentary, it works well.
As a biographer, and I think it's a tendency now that, perhaps now that Freudian psychiatry is in eclipse, we see that children grow up to be much like their parents.
That's right,
yes.
That's right.
And that's why I kept asking you so much about your mother.